Hello, and welcome to a November 11th reading with horror author Nancy Kilpatrick. My name is Mark Leslie Lefebvre, and I am honored to introduce the woman of the evening, Nancy Kilpatrick. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi, thanks, Mark. Okay.
So I'm just going to leave the stage to you. I'm going to get off stage and let you take over.
All right. Okay. If anybody's here, thank you for being here. It's nice to, I don't see you, but I know you're there somewhere. I'm going to read a chapter from a novel tonight, and this is a novel in a series. It's the fifth book in the series. The reason I'm reading the fifth book is because it's the newest book. You don't need to have read the earlier books to understand this one at all. It's not like that. But of course, if you want to read the previous books, feel free. They're available everywhere. So yeah. In this world that I've created, the series is called Thrones of Blood, and world is what I call an alternate reality. In my view, whenever you introduce anything supernatural, vampires and werewolves and zombies and all of that, it's automatically an alternative reality if you're putting them with humans, in my view. But so that's the world. It's it's like Earth, but maybe a little different. And there are two species, and the species are humans, who are called sapiens, as in Homo sapien, and vampires, which are called vampire, an old word for vampire, and plural is vampiri. So those are the two species. That's all you need to know. And I'm going to read this with my usual disclaimer. It's getting to be usual, my second and last reading. Yeah, that I'm not an actress, so I'll do my best. And I'm going to try to read from my Kindle, which will be interesting. Okay, so this is chapter 1 of Anguish of the Sapien Queen. Queen Leontine, the vampire king Hades is outside our gates. A gasp went through the throne room. Is he now? She said calmly. And how many warriors does he have with him, so that I may alert my generals to amass our army? 3, Your Highness. You've miscounted. You must mean 3,000. Your Majesty, he is requesting an audience with you. Leontine raised an eyebrow and glanced at her chief advisor, Thaddeus, who swallowed, then made his usual peculiar and loud throat-clearing noise. Finally, he wheezed, I advise against this, my queen. Because? The stick-thin, white-haired man shrugged. Helpful as always, she told the useless being whom she had inherited when she assumed the throne. She sighed, bored, frustrated, tired of this kingdom and all its problems, minor and major, none of which she could do anything about. Sick of the ineffectual surrounding and suffocating her, weary of plodding through each day as predictably as the day before, waiting for the moment when one of her loyal subjects would poison her, or perhaps be brave enough to embed a sword or bullet in her heart. She would almost welcome another vampire raid. Slay us all, she thought, or drag us to your pool of slaves. How could it be worse than this existence, with a dead past and a pointless, hopeless future bookending a flat present? Bring him in, she ordered. It's a trick, her most senior military officer stated emphatically. She glanced at Radai, a man barely trustworthy, who was constantly sniffing the winds to see which way they blew. She rejected his offer of marriage twice, knowing full well they were offers to take her throne out from under her. She looked away. If so, I'll regret it. If not, you will. While she waited, she composed herself on her gilded, jewel-encrusted throne, smoothing the long yellow satin skirt and adjusting the necklace of amber set amidst diamonds, her entire ensemble worn to pick up the color of her eyes. She sat more erect as her advisors nattered around her, sometimes addressing her, more frequently addressing one another, the hum of words sounding like the buzzing of bees, providing little meaning and no relevance. She stroked the sleek midnight feathers of the enormous raven perched on her forearm, which rested on the throne's arm, and leaned in to whisper, What do you think, Poe? Should I trust this vampire? The raven turned its head to the side, one dark, beady orb looking directly into her golden eye, cawed once, bobbed its head as if in a nod, then fell silent. At least you have a considered opinion, she muttered. The large and heavily gilded double doors of the back of the throne room opened, and a page announced in a nervous voice that rang through the tawny marble-walled chamber, The vampire king Hades! The room was crammed with dozens of her subjects, The hanger-ons in the court and those who had come for some sort of audience to resolve their no doubt petty problems, plus advisors and her ladies-in-waiting, being close to 100 people. The announcement caused the murmur of the crowd to escalate. Suddenly, a pale being strode through the doorway, and the room fell tomb silent in awe of this extraordinary event. All eyes, fearful to suspicious to hostile, focused on the vampire. Tall and lean, he was not quite as emaciated as other vampire Leontine had seen during raids of her city. His hair, shocking as gray salt, heavily flecked with black pepper, had, as was traditional with these undead, been pulled tightly back to dangle through a cone. This one turquoise, the same hue as his startling irises surrounding the typical black dot pupils. His skin, though pale, was mildly darker than other vampires she had encountered, but she was aware that his fortress held many like him. She assumed the vampire population of every blood drinker stronghold was composed of a similar variety of flesh tones. That had to be so. Vampiri had once been sapien, the living, bitten and turned into creatures of the night. He looked to be just about 30 sapien years, although she knew by rumor that he had lived over 3 centuries. He wore the outfit of a king of the bloodsuckers, the black metal and leather kilt, dark knee-high boots, and only a few bands across his chest. He carried no arms. His were natural weapons, teeth and talons being all any vampire needed. Behind him came 3 of his warriors dressed similarly, although they wore netted shirts. Their body language screamed tension. These fighters were wary, entering the lair of the sapiens in such a small number. Only their king seemed confident. Hades moved rapidly along the rust-colored carpet toward her, as if he did this every night. But of course, this was his first visit that did not involve a pillaging. Enemies did not make courtesy calls on one another's realms, and she was curious as to the reason for this contact. As he stopped at the foot of the steps to her throne, the room remained funereally silent, every sapien on guard, and those with weapons in their possession had them at the ready. The vampire stared up at her, but did not approach further. He focused his large aquamarine irises on her citrine eyes, but she did not sense him trying to mesmerize her. That would be foolish, and he did not appear to be a fool. King Hades, she said evenly, her duty to speak first, since there was no one to introduce them. Queen Leontine, he replied, with only a slight nod of his head, which befit a ruler visiting ruler greeting. She returned the nod minimally. Neither would give much ground, that was clear. He spoke in their mutual language as if they were old friends, but this was the first time they'd laid eyes on one another. Thank you for seeing me. Our soldiers have battled on many occasions, she said. Even recently, she reminded him. I'm delighted to finally be the face of one of my enemies. An enemy in general, he said, but not this night. I hope not. Otherwise, I'd have to have you killed. That would leave my throne room rather messy. She thought she saw a strange glimmer in his otherworldly eyes. Their color was similar to a piece of turquoise she often wore, warm and cold at the same time, a stone that reminded her of the depths of the ocean. She thought that his small black pupils resembled volcanic islands in the blue-green sea, and she found the colors fascinating. These were eyes she knew could change color rapidly, and if that occurred, the head of her army would have a silver-tipped arrow or bolt or a silver-encased bullet in Hades' chest about heart level. To what should I attribute the dubious pleasure of your visit? I wish to speak with you about a problem. Is a vampire problem my concern? It's your problem I wish to discuss. How intriguing, and what a surprise. I had no idea the king of the vampiri on our border cared so much for me and my realm, other than his nourishment. What is the nature of this problem that troubles you enough that you would venture into my castle with only 3 warriors for protection? It's a problem I'd like to discuss with you privately. You won't be alone with our queen, Red Eye snapped, raising his sword, but Leontine held up her free hand without bothering to look at him. She thought for only a second. All right. The old advisor, Thaddeus, said, My queen, you cannot. I asked for your advice earlier, Thaddeus, and it was lacking then, so don't annoy me with it now. She stood. Come with me, king of the undead, and we can discuss my problem in private as requested. I'm curious to know what it is. Her subjects dropped forward, some on bended knee, heads bowed, the females curtsying, though Radai and the military closest to the throne simply bowed their heads, but remained on their feet, their eyes fixed on the 3 vampire warriors and their king. Leontine turned and walked across the dais to a narrow door on her left, the gilded filigree work embedded with multicolored gems. The raven pose still held fast to her arm, but she was aware that the midnight creature pivoted its large head to look behind, at the vampire king, no doubt. A nervous page opened the door, and Leontine entered her private sitting room. Behind her, she heard the vampire's boots clack on the hardwood as he followed. She crossed the sitting room to the walk-in fireplace where the flames shot high, and then turned. Two maidservants, who had jumped to their feet with heads bowed as she entered, stood ready to attend to her needs until their faces reflected terror as they beheld what had followed her in. "Get out and close the door," she ordered both. The girls rushed toward the exit, giving the vampire king Hades a wide berth, slamming the door hard behind them. He was 10 meters across the room, and now she could see he was taller than her by half a head. His sturdy body was possibly more muscular than other vampiri she'd viewed during their raids, but she couldn't be sure. He had been at least olive-skinned when he was still sapien 3 centuries ago, but had paled considerably, as was normal for the previous living. She did not feel intimidated. Help was a scream away, and in reality, she was grateful for the diversion in this world otherwise impacted with ennui. "What do you want, bloodsucker?" "My name is King Hades," he said. "I know your name." "Then you should use it, Queen Leontine, so that you make a good impression on your savior." That made her laugh out loud, which caused Poe to call once sharply, "Savior from what?" "From yourself." Now she felt annoyed. "No riddles, vampire. I haven't the time nor the inclination to play mental games with you. Just tell me what's on your mind, then go. And I should warn you, if this is a trick, my soldiers are eager for action, and you will not leave here alive, or whatever ending to your current state that entails." "I'm not here as an enemy, but as a friend." "Unlikely. Unlikely, but true. I've come from a meeting of the alliance that has been formed by the Vampiri. As you know, there are other vampiric realms with leaders in several quadrants. 4 leaders from 4 realms have emerged to form a coalition to tackle major problems which affect us jointly." "Thank you for the lesson in vampire politics and geography. I don't see how this should concern me." He walked toward her, and she crossed her arms over her chest, holding the raven before her like a shield. "Get to the point, Vampire King." "You're as sharp-tongued as they say you are," he said, stopping 3 meters from her. "I'm happy my reputation precedes me into your dark world." "Likely as sharp as your bird's beak." "My bird can defend himself, as can I." He took several more steps toward her and reached out a hand. She froze, but he only was looking at the raven. "I wouldn't advise that, vampire. Poe trusts no one but me." Hades stared at the large bird, its one eye turned toward him, gazing back unblinking. Hades' talon finger slid down the silky feathered head. The bird more than tolerated this, and Leontine was both amazed and annoyed. "I see you have a way with Corvidae," she said crisply. "We vampiri are part of nature and have a way with most animals. This one is of the darkness, as are we. And of course we have wings in common," he said, referring to the dark feathery appendages furled behind him as lustrous as Poe's. She turned away abruptly, walked to Poe's perch, and placed the raven there, then turned back. "You were saying how you're here to save me." "The Alliance has determined that a virus has spread through the sapien population. It affects the males of your species only, turning them sterile." "This is old news, vampire, and I fail to see how it's a concern of yours." "I believe you know why it concerns me." She paused. "If we don't breed, your food supply dries up." "Succinctly put," he said. "Consequently, we have come up with a plan to help sapiens survive. Clearly, if you don't have affected males, you have no offspring, and your species will be ancient history within a generation." She turned her back on him, a daring but risky move, and stared at the yellow-orange flames of the fire. It was a problem she was well aware of, although her citizens were not. Only her medical advisor and Thaddeus knew, and she had instructed both to remain silent on pain of death. She couldn't risk an insurrection. As if reading her thoughts, he said, "There is always the possibility of a citizens' uprising, in which case you would likely be dethroned, if not killed, and chaos would reign. Still, the outcome would be the same. Within a generation, the city would be empty. I've come with an offer from the Alliance." She turned on him, finding he had moved closer, slightly more than half a meter away, as if he was bent on intimidating her. Her eyes narrowed. "I'm sure the situation gives you no small amount of pleasure, Deathbringer, and you'd happily pick off the citizens of my city until we're extinct. Is this your offer? To exterminate the population now rather than wait until we die childless of old age? Or would you prefer making us all slaves in your blood bank? He stared at her as if seeing something he had never seen before. What? She said. No really riposte? Finally, he said, what makes you so brittle? I'll give you 1 minute, and my clock is already counting toward the chime. I've come with what might be a solid solution, and you have yet to hear me out in a respectful manner. What you've done is insult me. So sensitive, walking courts? You vampiri have caused us grief since the beginning of recorded history, and you expect to be welcomed with open arms? Try to see beyond your fangs. We do not like your species. We do not trust you. Whatever your solution, it's not something we're interested in. Get out. She watched his eye color darken, and she tensed. If the turquoise ocean became a blood-red sea, he would attack her. Suddenly, without another word, he turned abruptly and stormed toward the door, leaving it open behind him. She would have loved to have rushed there to watch him escape the throne room with his 3 warriors. It would have brought a smile to her lips. But she didn't move. That would be showing too much interest. Ella, her lady-in-waiting, ran in, a look of horror on her face. My queen, are you all right? Of course I'm all right. Why wouldn't I be? Next at the door were Rada and Thaddeus, both poking their ridiculous heads into her sitting room with worried expressions on their faces. Court is over for the day, she snapped, waving a hand at them. You are all dismissed. Get out and close the door, she ordered, which they did. That's the end of chapter 1. I hear you.
Of course, my mic was off, and you couldn't hear me there. Thank you so much, Nancy. That was awesome. Tech issues. I have some questions I want to ask you. If people do have any questions, I invite you to please just leave them in the comments over on Facebook or YouTube, and we can pop them up, and Nancy can answer them. Before I ask my first question, I just want to say this comment popped up from Elaine when she was talking about the series, and Elaine says, I recommend reading them all. Fantastic series. So
Elaine is a reviewer for the Journal Stone publications online. She has reviewed all 5 of these books.
And apparently she's given them a thumbs up, right? So
yes, totally. Yeah.
So I want to find out a little bit more about where did this particular series, this universe, this alternate Earth, where did this come from?
Well, for a period of time, there was a period of time where I was just decided to just write short stories and edit anthologies, and moved away from novels. And I used to go to Florida in the winter for sometimes a week, sometimes 2 weeks. One year I decided to go for a month, and I took all my computer gear with me, my laptop and such, and thought, I'm going to do some writing down there. You're just going to try to do something that's kind of free flowing and not necessarily for publication, because for a long time I've written just for publication when I'm asked to write a story for an anthology or I have a contract for a novel. So to do something just for the fun of it, I thought I'd do that. So I did, and I sat down and I started writing this novel, which was very strange. It was full of all kinds of genres put together. It was a real mess, but it was a lot of fun to write. I was having a great time doing this. And so I worked every day on it with the window open because it was beautiful weather and warm, and it was really nice to get away from Montreal winters, So yeah, and I found that by the end of the month that I was there, I had written the entire first novel. I'd written a second novel up to 60,000 words, and a third novel around 60,000 words. The first one was 100,000 words. So I'd written all this stuff. I was just in this mad heat of creativity, which was really a joy because I hadn't had that kind of free flowing release for a long time, and I just thought these were fun, and I was enjoying doing it, and I didn't think much about it. And after a while, I once in a while I would refer to them on Facebook as the unpublishables. I'm going to work on the unpublishables, because I just didn't see anybody looking to these for publication. So through different people saying to me, "Oh, well, maybe they can be published. You should think about it." Blah, blah, blah. So I started thinking, well, yeah, but if they're going to be published, they can't have 10 different genres in there. And there's lots of crossovers, of course. You get mysteries that are supernatural mysteries, or vampires in old westerns, and there's all kinds of things like that. But this was way too much. This is just like the kitchen sink was in there. Just everything was in there because I was just being silly and ridiculous. So I had to pull a lot of stuff out and basically left it in this world, which is it's not identifiable exactly. It's up to the reader to determine where this is in time and space. And most people think it's sort of like the Middle Ages, but then once in a while there's something thrown in there, like a watch or whatever. I just throw something in. It's kind of vague, but it's also sort of modern in the sense of the way the characters interact with each other. And there's a lot of animosity, obviously, between the humans and the vampires. There has to be because the vampires want blood, and the humans don't want to give it. So this is two worlds that are pretty much always at war with each other. And so it came out of that, and then when I started to think more seriously about this is when I basically took myself in hand and said, okay, you've got to get stuff out of there, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that, and think about what it is you're trying to say in these books. Why are you writing all of these books? What are they about? And so I did that. I thought of that, and then one thing led to another, and I had a few different options in terms of publishing, but I ended up deciding to go with Crossroad Press because first of all, I knew Dave Wilson for hundreds of years, way back when we were all on Genie, back in the 80s. So, and I knew he had this, he had actually started a press where he was doing reprints of old books, backlist of people that they had the rights to. And so he'd do the ebooks and so he had that kind of thing. And then he started to do some print books of backlist books for people. And there was a point where he came to doing original novels. And when that was there, I talked to him about it, and he said he was interested in doing this. And I thought, yeah, this will give me a lot of control over what I'm doing, which for the first time really having the kind of control that every writer wants to have, where, I get to choose the cover. I get to do that, and and just I can write what I want to write with it. I don't have to dampen things down or for a certain kind of market or whatever. And yeah, so it's been a nice collaboration with Dave to do this, and I'm happy with Crossroad Press because the way the books, they're beautiful. If you haven't seen them, they're in hardcover, trade paperback, and also ebook. I mean, the cover's there, but this is what the actual, I guess it's over here, the actual book looks like. That's a hardcover.
It's
And
gorgeous.
they're
Yeah.
beautiful, and the artwork that's on them was done by Istvan Kadar, who is a friend of mine, and he's an incredible artist, and he's put together, the covers for all four. He's done more of my books than these five that are done. So yeah, you can see the banner there. So all of those are beautiful covers, and I think they show the exquisiteness I'm trying to get across of the stories, and if that makes any sense at all. So that's kind of the history of where they came from, and I think one more book because I originally planned 7 books, but then I started condensing things to try to make it shorter into 6 books thing. And so next year, hopefully number 6 will be out, and that will release me. I will be able to go on to something else.
Well, I'm fascinated by the fact that you called them the unpublishables because your goal was to sit and just write from your heart, like just write the
Yeah,
story you wanted to tell.
as I
I
did when
mean,
I was first a young writer, as I did at the beginning of my career. That's how I
right.
wrote.
So, I mean,
And it was
what
nice
was it
having,
about that experience? Because obviously they're not only publishable, but Elaine, as a reviewer, has given thumbs up to all of them, and obviously your publisher's pleased with them as well. So, what is that distinction then? Is there something true to the idea of writing the kind of book you would want to read, or writing that heart story?
I think, writing the heart story that I wrote at the beginning of my career, I wrote a couple of those novels. One of them has never been published. I got my first agent with the first novel I wrote, which was well, actually, it was the second novel, but they just didn't go anywhere. And he was a high-powered agent. I was fearless in those days, and I basically went to they had a book, I think it was called The Literary Marketplace, that listed every agent. This was so long ago that there were a lot of agents, there were a lot of publishers, and there was a lot of publishing going on. So, this was the high time of publishing. And I went and I looked for agents that would represent that type of book, which was sort of a literary commercial novel. And I found 10 agents, and I picked out the top agents because I went right for the top. I went to the biggest named agents that have the biggest name clients, and they were in New York, and that's where I wanted. And I wrote letters to the 10, and I said, I have this novel, and would you like to see some sample chapters? 8 of them said no. And then 2 of them said yes, and I sent sample chapters, and one of them didn't want it, and the other one did. And that agent was Henry Morrison, who was one of the top agents in New York. So he took it on, and unfortunately, it didn't sell. It got very nice responses from all of the 8 publishers that it was sent to, and he wanted to see something else. And by then, I had a vampire novel, which he didn't really want to see. So it was like that. But those early books, they were written in that way. I didn't have a publisher. They were just written because I wanted to write them. And
Right.
that's how you do it at the beginning. You write what's in your heart, you write the way you want to write. Now, the vampire novel ended up getting published. It took a couple of decades, but it ended up being part of another series that I'd done in the past. But yeah, but as you get into the business and you do realize you have like a career, it's not just a hobby. This is, you have to determine, you're putting out time and energy to write, and why are you doing this when you could be doing macrame or something else? Why are you all this energy and time? And yeah, so at that point, then you start thinking more seriously about how to get things published. And for me, I've always I found pretty quickly in my life that the conventional approaches don't work for me. They never have. And I'll just give a quick example of this. How I have a lot of short stories published. I've published about over 220 short stories over the year. That's a lot of work. And the way I started out doing it, and I shouldn't even say this is probably illegal now, but the way I did it was I there used to be a ton of markets for short stories, and they were magazines and periodicals and journals and anthologies, of course. And the bigger anthologies were hard to get in, but once in a while you got a bite, you could get in. And you were supposed to be sending the story to one publisher at a time. And I figured I'd be dead by the time I had something published. So what I did is I set up a chart, listed all of these publications that were possible. It was several pages long. It used to be such a good time. And I would pick out 10, the top 10, and I would send the same story to the top 10. And when I get a rejection, I send it to number 11, the next one, number 12. And I got a lot of stories published that way. And people would always say to me, I was in a writer's workshop, and they would say, what if 2 people want the same story? What are you going to do then? I said, I'm going to go out and buy a lottery ticket. That's so rare. And it only happened once in all the years I did that. It only happened one time. And I picked the better market, and I said to the other one, I'm sorry, I'm going with someone else. And that was that, and they didn't hold it against me. This is part of life. So yeah,
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know where that fits in with what you asked me, but there's an answer.
No, well, but that's fascinating. I mean, simultaneous submissions. Some markets accept them anyways, and that's just part of the game, right?
Yeah, they do now. In the past, it was really verboten. You just did not do that. Nobody
Yeah,
wanted to waste the time reading a story and then want it and couldn't get it. Ado Van
yeah.
Valken
So
had a
I
great
was
story.
I was also curious to. I was wondering if was it the return to vampires, and what is it about vampires that compels you as a writer that you keep returning to share vampire tales?
Well, in my childhood, I liked to watch horror movies. Of course, all children like that, or most children like that. And we had the late night Saturday night movies on, which I couldn't watch because I was too young. But every once in a while, I got to watch them anyway. And my favorites were the vampires. I just thought that it was such a cool idea to have this being that was once human that could still pass for human, as opposed to when you get a werewolf. Yeah, they're human, but then when they turn into a wolf, you don't mistake them for anything except a wolf, right? Zombies are the really old vampires. They're like the ones that were in mythology and history, and they're not really appealing. They don't have much going for them. They're just mindless dead things walking and eating. So I always liked the vampire. I thought it had so many possibilities. And as I got older, I was reading vampire books and watching more movies. And the more books I read, the more I saw the scope of the vampire wasn't locked into this kind of European approach. There was a bigger world out there of vampires. So yeah. Anyway, it hit me for some reason, and of course, I also remember seeing in my early adolescence, Christopher Lee in Horror of Dracula. And he was so hot. He was just such, dynamic. I was actually thrilled I got to meet that man. Christopher Lee, who did the role of Dracula. And he's just a wonderful character, and he did it so well. He did it so. I mean, if you're going to have a count, you want to have a count who's sort of count-like.
Yeah.
And Bela Lugosi, of course, is from another time. He was the original one on screen, but well, unless you're counting the German cinema, but he was the, he was also count-like, but it was a different era, a different approach. And I guess
Right.
Christopher Lee sort of, confirmed my belief that the vampire was really very special in the supernatural realm.
Excellent. And your novels confirm that vampires are very special. And thank you for this. I just want to pop up a few comments from some people. So Carrie says, thank you for offering this. So thank you, Nancy, for doing this wonderful reading.
Thank you, Carrie.
And Colleen says, thanks to Mark and Nancy, switched over to YouTube as the quality is better. Good to see you there, Colleen. Thank you so much for watching.
Oh, hi, Colleen. Thank you for coming.
Excellent. So I appreciate that. This was a lot of fun. You got a little bit of a sneak peek for some people who may not be familiar with the series. You have something you can get these through. Probably ask for them through your local library, order them through a local bookstore, online at Amazon, other online retailers. Is that true?
Yeah, they're everywhere. You can get them wherever you can get books. That's the theory
Excellent.
anyway.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this reading tonight, Nancy, and thank you guys for watching.
And thank you, Mark, for your studio work.
My pleasure. Have a wonderful night.
And, thank you. Bye, everybody.